Hi, welcome everybody. So welcome to the operational processes that you need for your consulting business. I am joined by three expert panelists here. They have all had their own successful consulting businesses, small agencies, that sort of thing, that they have grown, and they're going to kind of let us know what types of things that you should have in order on the business side of things, and what types of things will help you stay organized and most efficient as you prospect clients, onboard them to your consulting business. So my name is Anna Devendorf. I'm the marketing manager at FanBooster. If you're just here for the great content, you don't know a lot about FanBooster, we have a lot of features that are specifically oriented towards agencies or consultants that play really well with people that have multiple clients. So, that's ability to co-brand, features that allow you to do sort of client approval workflows built in. So we kind of realize, there's a lot of content out there about marketing strategy, how to do things on Instagram, Twitter, and not a ton of stuff that helps people like that on the business side, and actually growing their agencies and what's going on kind of behind the scenes. So we're trying to speak to that today, help you guys out on that side as well. Today, with us being really process oriented, you'll hear me ask a lot of common denominator questions. So, what are the few things you need in every pitch email? What are the few things that you need in every onboarding process? And that way, hopefully, we can kind of boil down to something that you guys can templatize and hopefully document that you're able to rinse and repeat a little bit more and make your processes really efficient. So I mentioned that these three are experts who have grown either freelancing, consulting, agency businesses, that they're going to speak to this stuff today, but I'll go around, I'll let them introduce themselves, say a little bit about themselves and what they work on before we kick off. So I'll kick it off to you, Maddy, first.
Hi, everyone. I am Maddy Osman, and I run a company called the Blogsmith, and we create SEO content for B2B tech companies, and moving into an agency model is something that I'm kind of just getting into, so I'll be learning with you guys, listening to these other awesome panelists today.
Awesome. So I'm G, and I used to be a social media manager for small businesses, and so I did that and then kind of moved into specifically content creation for healthcare-based companies. And so that's what I do. I create, kind of like Maddy, SEO content, but not just that. Most of my content is educational content because my background is in healthcare, and it's supposed to educate and, basically help these healthcare businesses bring more patients, bring more clients in, but educate them on the way to doing that.
Cool. And I am AJ Silber. I'm one of the founders, kind of managing director of the Guerrilla Agency. And the Guerrilla is really a full stack agency, but primarily kind of our bread and butter is really SEO, search engine optimization. We also do a lot of web design work, paid media, social media, that type of thing. I like to call us a boutique agency in that we're small. We're 8 employees today, but we're constantly growing. So I'm excited about that.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. So just a couple housekeeping notes. We will reserve a significant portion at the end of this webinar for Q&A, where I'll roll out any questions that you guys want to throw in that to the panelists. So anytime we talk about something you want us to elaborate on, you think of something, or if you already came prepared with things you want to talk about, throw them in the question box and we'll get through those at the end. Another thing that I want to make sure you guys know is that a recording of this webinar will be going out to the email address that you used to register for the webinar tomorrow. And then next week on the blog, you can make sure and look for a recap of it written out and including the video as well. And if you're looking for a little bit more background information on kicking off this journey, maybe the skills that you need to start this consulting business or, you know, ongoing education, things like that. That's what we talked about in the first webinar in this series last month. So you can find that on the Fan Booster blog as well. So I think what would be the most helpful in talking about these is if we think about this in chronological order. So day one, you're like, I want to be a marketing consultant. I want this to be my business. What are the things that you absolutely are non-negotiable you need to be a business and to work with the first person that you talk to as a potential client? I'll kick this one off to AJ first.
Cool. So yeah, I'm like, I would say when I started the Guerrilla, you know, it was really sort of a fly by the seat of my pants. And then that's kind of the way that, you know, I am as a person. So I like to say yes and figure it out on the way home. So to me, the real answer is nothing. I think if you have a set of skills out there that you want to exploit, whether that is social media marketing, search engine optimization, content writing, I would say get out there and find clients. I would say the biggest thing for me is picking kind of a subset of maybe a market that you want to work with, creating a giant list of those prospects, going on LinkedIn, figuring out exactly, you know, who those people are and what their email addresses are, or even if you want to get into cold calling or whatever the case is, and reaching out to them and kind of talking through your service offering and what you're kind of thinking of doing, you know. And that kind of leads me to my next point is having a service offering, I think, is more important than, you know, any of the other stuff. And this is what I offer to, you know, potential clients, you know, and then really once you get somebody on the hook and let's say it's okay, well, you know, I'm going to perform social media marketing services. Well, then, okay, hey, now I need an LLC. Now I might need to, you know, establish my business through the state, things of that nature. But I think if you haven't ever worked with a client before and you haven't really established a business, I think, you know, getting out there and getting dollars in the door, I'm really like a sales cures all guy. So that's my take on it. Okay.
Maddie and G, what do you think? Agree or disagree?
I totally agree. I don't know if you noticed, I was nodding my head throughout everything AJ was saying because
I did. It's very
probably the same kind of person. I agree with him, and you know, I usually tell people skip making the business cards, skip making the website, skip like all these fancy things, and get your first paying client, right? Because then you're gonna have something to stand on to even create a website or even create an LLC or even have something to file on your taxes that you're filing the LLC for, you know? So I'm the same way that until in my philosophy, I know there are all these other legal things, but until you have a paying client, you don't have a business. So focus on that, focus on getting somebody's foot in your door. And then once you get that client, wow them, right? And then they're going to be a source of, that person could become a source of referrals, testimonials, and so on, so that you can build out the other things. But I think first and foremost, if you're just starting out, get that first paying client. That's and everything else can follow. I'm not saying don't file your LLC and all that, but I think the first thing, get the paying client.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think my insight is a hybrid of those things. Definitely agree that sales is kind of the most important function that your business needs to invest time in and, you know, effort into developing that process. But I think it's something that you want to be doing at the same time while you're building these things. So if you have 8 hours a day, 4 of it should be sales, the other 4 should be building the materials. And then I think the other thing is, don't let the process of building all those materials overwhelm you. Something is better than nothing. Just, you know, getting out there and getting started is the best thing you can do. And you can always iterate on those things, build on them as you go along. One resource that I can recommend to you if you're trying to think through all these important branding materials is Chris Gillibaugh. I might be butchering his name, but he wrote a book called Side Hustle, and it has this like 30-day plan, because his whole book is about like how you're gonna fit all this stuff in, you know, in addition to your life and your job. And so each day is like build the, you know, the skeleton of the website, work on your business cards, like all that sort of stuff. So I would totally recommend looking at that if you need a little bit of hand-holding to figure out what should I do when.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So AJ, you mentioned, you know, even if you don't have a website, if you don't have the materials, sending out those sales emails and that kind of thing, and a lot of agreement on that side. So if you don't have a link to a website or anything else there, what are you putting in that email? What, in your opinion, is that perfect email that will still?
Yeah, and actually this is a really interesting one. And this is something we started doing, or I started doing a couple of years ago. And really how I kind of started the agency was, you know, a lot of cold emailing. And I think cold emailing works better than cold calling, but I would let like anybody kind of, you know, test that and, you know, really judge for themselves what works best for them. But like in my experience, it's all about kind of developing. So first of all, develop that list of prospects like we talked about. And then in that first email, the most important thing is, I mean, you got to send these emails to a lot of different people. So having kind of a canned email and email sequence is really important. But having that first email be personable. So like, let's say I'm up here in Minneapolis and I find a prospect who, you know, maybe they're a local plumber and they went to the University of Minnesota. I might say, hey, go Gophers. I lived on the University of Minnesota campus forever. I lived in Diggitown. Like, what do you think about the library bar and the free bacon, right? So I'll say something like that. It'll be personable. That'll encourage them to read the following email. And then normally what I do is I follow up 3 times. If they haven't responded, then I let it go. But in my follow-ups, I'll also be personable with that first couple of sentences. And usually I find that, you know, after a while or after doing it through, you know, hundreds, if not like thousands of emails is kind of what you're going to get into. Like after sending about 100 emails, I'll have usually, you know, the data on my end says that I'll have 5 people to reach out and we'll close kind of 1 client, right? Which is pretty good metrics. But yeah, you can kind of develop that process on your own. Maybe for you, it's, you know, going out to businesses and knocking on the door. I've heard of that work for people. I've heard of cold calling obviously works, smiling and dialing. But yeah, like I would say, if anything, it's going to be being really personable in your approach. You know, it becomes a little, and now I'm rambling, but it becomes a little challenging with like a Gmail account. You know, if you're sending from a Gmail account, that's a little bit more challenging than having kind of a professional email address. So you can maybe establish that, or like an email signature would be another thing that I would probably put in there with a picture of your face, you know, put a face in the name, maybe a link, even if it's not a link to a website, could just be a link out to your LinkedIn. So that would be kind of my recommendations.
Okay, I love that. That's a good kind of 4-part checklist. Bare bones, your first pitching, headshot, signature, you know, LinkedIn or portfolio, bare bones website, whatever you've got. Yeah, and that, so what do you, I'll bring this back to G, because you were agreeing with him before about kicking off these sales emails and that kind of thing. What is in your perfect sales email if you don't have the more sophisticated materials?
Right. So I like to tell the people that I coach to have some kind of sample of your work. So as a writer, right, even if you have, you know, if you, let's say you've never had a blog before, right, you've never written anything before, well, I want you to develop like a PDF file, right? Because if you're going to okay, let me take that back a little bit. If I'm going to pay you to do something for me, I need to see samples, right? Mm-hmm. When you send that email to that client, just think that you're sitting in their seat. If somebody sends you an email and says, I want to take your photographs, I want to build your website, I want to manage your social media, I want to write for you. Well, where is the evidence that you've done this before? You may be brand new, right? But you can still build out 2 or 3 things that shows that you have some experience doing this. And so for me, I always tell clients that in your pitch emails, make sure, don't make the client reach out back to you and say, well, where is the evidence of your work? In that first email, along with being personable, like AJ said, along with having some, I love to like connect with people that are local to me. I live in San Diego, and there are a lot of biotech and health companies here. And so I usually say I'm a local person, and usually that starts a conversation, right? So apart from all those really nice elements, you don't want that potential client to do extra work to find out proof of your work. So even if you're starting out and all you have is a PDF sample, all you have is some nonprofit in your city that you built out social media for, include that in your email, because then you have something to go off of. Not everybody's going to say yes, but somebody is going to say yes eventually. But you want that to be there and not have it be a process of, because this has happened to me, people pitching me, and I'm like, but where's the proof? So whatever it is that you do, add in your proof. And also the second thing is to keep it short. People are short on time. Don't write like your whole life story, you know. Because I find that keeping it to 5 to 6 sentences is best in my own testing, and so keep it short and to the point, and have samples.
Okay, awesome. So we've got added to the list, besides those first two things, and the professional email address, some sort of file, some sort of whatever you've got for a portfolio. You throw that in there as well. So Maddy, are we forgetting anything?
Well, I wanted to add for the previous question, headshot. That's the professional material you need to start with. And it doesn't have to be something where you go to like a photographer and, you know, pay a lot of money, although that's honestly a great investment. It's just something where you're smiling, you have like a clear background, you're not holding a beer. Like that's probably gonna work for any of your professional needs, unless you're a brewer or unless you take beer clients. But that aside, so, and then another thing I was going to say when it comes to samples, like don't overthink it. Again, it doesn't have to be a paid client that you have a published sample with. You could work with a charitable organization who would love your help. You could write a blog on your own website that you're going to also use to get your ideal client. So it can serve as both a lead gen tool and, you know, an example of your capabilities. You could guest post on another client's website if you do writing stuff. So try to think outside the box if you're getting stuck on that piece. But besides that, so I used to work at Groupon. I did sales there. And another thing I would totally recommend is if you want to freelance or if you want to build an agency, like get a sales job, because it will take care of so much that like, it's hard to figure that stuff out on your own. It's much easier when there's like a manager, like, you know, barking in your ear every day. You have to do this, and then you learn it.
Yeah.
But so the things that I would add to our checklist here for the sales emails would be introduce yourself at the beginning. Just, I'm Maddy. I'm an SEO content strategist for B2B tech brands at the Blogsmith. And then get straight to the point. The reason that I'm getting in touch is because fill in the blank, you know, your website needs some help, like however you want to say that. Another thing we talked about at Groupon is the WIFM, what's in it for me. So remember, when you're writing that email, it's not about you at all. And when I get those emails, you know, oh, you know, we do web design and we can make you an app and stuff. And it's like, okay, but you have no idea what I'm doing. So if you haven't demonstrated that you've done your due diligence in some way, like a personalized, you know, note, or even if it's a templated email, but you have templates for different situations that you're going after. I love the local approach as well. I think that's another great way to make an instant connection with someone. So having something like that. And then besides the sample, the last thing that I'll add is a third-party testimonial. So, you know, we did the same thing. Like, so let's just say you're going after a restaurant client, like, you know, hey, so-and-so, I'm Maddy, I do SEO content, and I noticed that your blog hasn't been active in a while. You know, I worked with restaurant down the street, and we put together this content strategy, and they saw traffic go through the roof. They saw their bookings increase by this percent. Like, whatever you can quantify is great, but even just throwing that name that you know they're going to know is also great.
Awesome. Okay. I want to ask you guys about two things that I hear some controversy about including in these initial conversations None of you guys mentioned these, so I want to get your thoughts on if you should include these things and how much work you should put into them beforehand. So the first thing is your pricing. So I'd love to get some thoughts on how early into the situation you introduce that and how you go about creating that structure ahead of time. If you guys, change it situation to situation, if you're always hourly, if you're always fixed price, or if you leave it out of the conversation at all.
Yeah, so now that our process has really evolved, what we try to do is when we get a contact form fill on our website, I'll try to set up a discovery call right away. And because I've become a little bit more busy in kind of running the day-to-day agency and in sales, I try to keep that discovery call from, kind of in the 10 to 20 minute range. And a lot of times I kick off the conversation with talking a lot about the client, more about the client. I try to put my knowledge gathering hat on rather than I'm going to pitch you on why we're going to work with you cap on. So I learn about them, I learn if we're a good fit, and then really towards kind of the tail end of the call, I'll say, well, hey, do we have kind of an idea on timeline when we want to kick this thing off? Most of the time it's right away. Sometimes it's next month, sometimes it's, next quarter, whatever the case is. And then I ask for budget, and I really like to get them to say some type of budget, because I don't like to come out and say hey, well, we're $2,500 a month or we're $5,000 a month or whatever the case is. Unless they straight up ask for it, if they say, hey, I don't have a budget in mind. I sometimes will throw out a joke, if they say I don't have a budget in mind, it's all right, well, we'll start at $100,000 a month and we'll work up from there, throw a little humor into it. But yeah, in regards to fixed or hourly pricing, I think that is really kind of dependent upon what you're doing and how you're doing it. A lot of agencies have packaged out their pricing and their products. So as an SEO agency, we have some very fixed pricing in our SEO specific department, but then from a web design perspective, we might go hourly on that, because it's really hard to determine, how many times the client's going to come back and ask for revisions, et cetera, or even from a paid media standpoint, we might do hourly too. So we kind of go, it's kind of dependent upon the service that we offer. Since we're really strong in SEO, we just know what it takes to really get a website to rank. So those are kind of going to be some fixed packages. And then there's always opportunity to move up and down. But yeah, I know it's kind of a little wishy-washy, but yeah, I mean, just to kind of reiterate, if a client asks me what is your price, if I email somebody or if somebody contacts them and says, what is your price? I always try to get them on the phone. If they really press me on email, I say, we're probably not going to be a good fit for each other. They're just reaching out for price. Because really at the end of the day, everyone on this panel, right, provides some type of either SEO or social media marketing service or whatever the case is. And we'd all say my price is $1,500, your price is $2,000, your price is $3,000. We provide X, Y, Z service, so.
You muted yourself, AJ.
Let's see, AJ, can we hear you?
Yeah, try just hitting it on and off. That usually fixes it. Tech probs.
I know. We'll give him a second, and we can kick this off to either of you two as well. And I'm interested to hear from you guys, and also come back to AJ on if that's the way that you handle it externally, while having price documented internally, or if it really is just kind of case by case from scratch every time. So let's go to G with how you do and communicate your pricing.
Right. So I do have internally, I do have a minimum that I will not go below. So that's like a benchmark for this is where I say I don't think we'll be a great fit for each other, right? So I know what that is, right? And so usually it is a case-by-case basis, because especially now that I'm doing more writing, the thing that comes with writing is, first of all, you're not just paying me for writing, you're also paying me, my education also comes into play because I use those elements in creating pieces for healthcare-based companies, right? And so how much research is it going to take? Is it going to take me 2 days versus is it going to take me 2 hours? If I have to think about all those elements, then pricing is going to be different from client to client. If all I'm doing is writing a 500-word blog post, that's different from writing a 10-page white paper, right? So then pricing is really going to be different. But even with those projects, I think the way I think about it is, what am I willing to do? Where am I willing to meet that person? So then with AJ's what AJ said with asking the client, well, what's your budget, right? I get to know what their budget is. And if it's something that is in the range where, or the range that I've set or the minimum I've set, then we can move forward. On the other hand, if they mention their budget or they state that, well, we think you're too expensive, then, usually my answer to that is, well, I don't think we'll be a great fit for each other then. And that's fine, because maybe they'll find somebody else that will do what they want for that price, but it's not going to be me, right? And I think sometimes with people that are starting out as freelancers or eventually who are agency owners tend to not to do that, but especially like solo freelancers will, be like, oh, well, maybe if I lose this, then I won't get another client. And that's simply not true. I am a big believer in like state your prices and go with it. So, but then again, too, I do have room for knowing where my client is coming from, what they expect of me with our relationship, so that we can come to a compromise. But internally, I do have a limit. I hope that makes sense. Again, it's not so cut and dry, I feel, with pricing, but I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Okay.
Yeah, so pricing, obviously, it's very subjective for all of us and across all sorts of different industries and services. So I'll tell you the way I handle it, which may or may not work for you. It's listed on my website, and the reason being is because maybe it's just the way that I, look for services and products. I like to be able to see it. I like to be able to evaluate based on price as part of my evaluations. And I know that a lot of the people who are gathering information for decision makers, they want an easy way to get that information and present it. So it's kind of thinking with myself in mind and with sort of like other people who are doing research in mind. So it's on my website. And then not only that, whenever somebody books time with me, I use Calendly. I have different events for different things. And one of them is a 15-minute intro meeting, which any new content client would go through that. And so while they're filling out their name, their email, all the details for whatever Calendly is asking them, there's also a question that says, have you seen and do you agree to my pricing? And it has a link to my page that has pricing on it. So they literally have to say, yes, like that's cool, before the meeting goes through. Otherwise, I don't take the meeting because I honestly don't have time to sit on sales calls all day. And I have plenty of published samples out there. So people can make up their minds about, if they want to work with me or not. And then by the time we get on that intro call, it's just a matter of like, what's our first topic going to be? It's not a sales call. So that's one way to do it. Not everybody's comfortable sharing their prices, but one thing that I would challenge everyone on this webinar to do is to think about how you could productize your service, how you can kind of break it down into those various elements, kind of like what G was saying, writing a blog versus writing a white paper. There's different things that go into it, so you have to price it differently. A good example of where you could figure out how to productize your service. I, up until recently, offered my services on Fiverr. They have a pro marketplace, so I was not offering things for $5 a pop. But they do a really good job, the sellers on Fiverr, of sort of breaking down what's the base package, what are the extra add-ons, things like that. So I would totally recommend going there and just sort of browsing around in a category similar to what you sell. Hourly versus project and so on, I charge per word. It just scales really nicely. And depending on the type of writing, you know, the word count price also changes based on what I'm including in that, such as keyword research, such as uploading things to a client's content management system, such as adding feature and supporting images and, you know, all the other stuff that goes into it. I think the biggest takeaway I could give in terms of which way to price is like the client doesn't have to know how long it takes you. Again, like what G was saying, like your experience comes into play and you shouldn't be punished for being efficient. So if it's not necessary that they know that, I wouldn't tell them.
Yeah, I really love this theme of respecting your own time. I think that's super important, that just because you're starting out, like a lot of people on this call most likely are, you know, that doesn't mean that you have to go through some sort of earning your dues period where you don't respect your time. So I love that we're emphasizing that. I think, Maddy, the tip you're giving about, you know, going somewhere like Fiverr and learning how to productize, you know, maybe make things sort of a la carte of what you're thinking about, even if you don't end up using that to share your pricing. That's a really great way of kind of accomplishing what AJ was talking about earlier about having a service offering. Even if you've never had any clients and you don't really know what your services would be, that can kind of help you work that out and give you a list you can provide to people. Yeah. The second thing,
something Maddy said right now, when she was speaking, she talked about having the form, like kind of the intake form for the people that want to schedule kind of discovery calls with her. I think that's brilliant. I never really thought of that. Actually, I'm stealing that. But I never really thought of that because I would usually want to get on the phone with people without the form. We would do via email. And I think that's excellent, especially because it also asks the question, are you willing to pay this much? At least this much, you know? So it sets the expectation from the beginning. So nobody's time is wasted. I really love that. I just wanted to mention that.
And I will say, to AJ's point, if you're not like seeding that pricing ahead of time, getting budget or getting an idea of budget in that sales call and getting a timeline, those are like the two most important things you could do on that call, besides uncovering whatever issues that they have that you can solve.
Yeah, totally. And I don't want to sound like super disingenuous when I say this, but a lot of that first call is timeline and budget. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And because I mean, we do probably, you know, anywhere from like 2 to 5 to sometimes, you know, could be 7 to 10 of those phone calls a week. And yeah, my time is valuable and everyone's time is valuable. So getting on there and saying, well, hey, listen, like, how can I help you? What's the timeline? What's the budget? You know, trying to figure that out right away. But then again, like first, you know, when you're first starting out, maybe you're not getting enough of those calls or a ton of those calls. And, you know, maybe you're reaching out to people and maybe and you're doing a little bit of work and a lot of your time is prospecting. So there is probably an opportunity to maybe, you know, showcase your personality and your skill set maybe a little bit more on that first call. But we just don't, you know, at our kind of size and scale, we just don't have that luxury. So.
Yeah, I think some sort of intake form or at least a documented list of intake questions that you do on a call is another really great, you know, material to add to our list that we're kind of compiling here as we walk through this webinar. So you guys mentioned budget and timeline. Is there anything else that you would say is a top thing that you need to know if someone's going to just create in Google Forms or something easy like that, you know, an intake form to help them get a better idea of who they're working with?
Yeah, so I create an intake form for my coaching clients and I use Google Forms. So I feel like that's a really easy tool because most people are on Gmail. Most people know what Google Forms, most people know what Google Forms are. I take that back because I'm like, do most people know? But most people are on Gmail. And if you send them a really simple form with 3-4 questions that takes them less than 5 minutes, it's easy. So I think, you know, in terms of tools, Google Forms is definitely it's definitely great. And you can always link that with whichever scheduling tool that you use, whether that's Calendly or whatever tool it is that you use. There's definitely that. which then usually ties back to my Google Calendar. As you can see, there's a theme going on here. So I try to make it seamless so that it's like it's like the Calendly to the Google form to the calendar, so that I know automatically it's scheduled on my calendar and I know to call that person at that time. So it's Google Forms for me. And
I love that. No, that's awesome. We rely heavily on the contact form on our website, but I mean, tying it all together, that's a piece that we really, I mean, a lot of times I just reach out to them and schedule a phone call. So, I mean, I would probably even take that and say, how can we, tie that whole piece together? I know there's a lot of software out there, but I do really like Google because it's free,
And you can integrate it to other things with like Zapier, so you can make it even more useful. So yeah, things that I would put on like a business development sales intake form would be different from an onboarding form. But some things that I would ask either in a form or like during a call would be things like, what have you worked with someone like me before, and how did that go, and why are you talking to me? Like what went wrong with that? Another question based on my time at Groupon in sales is asking things that get to budget, get to kind of like what they're spending on things. So trying to draw back what I would be helping them with in marketing their business to numbers. What is a new customer worth to you? So when I used to work at Groupon, one of the big verticals that we worked in was food and drink, restaurants and stuff like that. So we'd always ask, like, what's the average bill for 2 people? Because that's usually what the Groupon would be structured as. It's that sales price for a 2-person meal. And so, then you can start to get into, if somebody then goes back and says, hey, this price is too much. Well, you go back and you can say, well, this is our goal. And if we hit the goal, then we get this amount of money for you, and it covers the cost of my marketing. Is that not worth it to you? And so that's why the budget questions are so important. That's why it's so important to tie it back to, what's really happening in their business, and to get those numbers before you talk about budget, because they're not going to tell you after you, tell them how much it's going to cost.
Yeah, and honestly, Maddy, that's awesome. And I want to expand on that a little bit and say, like, yeah, we talk about goals a lot. We talk about, like, cost to acquire a customer a little bit on that first call if they know some of those numbers. And then, what's the net on one sale? And, when somebody calls in and like the net on one sale is like $10,000, I might make a joke about it and be like, God, man, with our packages, you're going to make my job easy. We just have to get one customer in the first 3 months and this is covered. Like, oh man, yeah. Like, so yeah, driving back home to those numbers and saying, because when you just, once again, going back to, taking a micro step back, it's like, okay, well, yeah, our price is $3,500 a month, $5,000 a month, like $10,000 a month, whatever it is. It's really like, okay, well, if we get you one customer in the first 3 months, or, maybe it's they're kind of selling widgets, and it might have to be like we get them, 100 new widget sales or whatever the case is. But driving back to that and saying, well, yeah, but then we've also done, we've done that a handful of times with some other customers, and in the first 3 months, 6 months, like there's going to be some type of ROI on this investment. So I totally agree with you, Maddy. That's awesome.
Yeah, I loved that you mentioned that an intake form will be different than an onboarding form, because I think that's another really useful thing that, a budding consultant, budding agency can document, templatize as well. So what is different on the onboarding form? What are the few must-haves for an onboarding form to make that process go a lot more quickly and easily?
Well, I can start if you guys would like, because I just opened mine up, so I can just look at it.
Just read it off.
So in terms of what I ask my customers for as a content creator, it's stuff like, what's your website URL, social media links, who's my primary contact, how do I get in touch with them, is there anyone else I need to talk to, what can you tell me about your brand, are there words I need to avoid, what's your tagline, do you have a style guide you can share with me, different things like that. Asking information about their audience. I want to know some demographics, some psychographics, anything else along those lines. I ask them about their competition so I can keep that in mind. You know, if they have any brands that inspire them, I ask them questions about that. And then I do actually ask the past content efforts questions with them versus usually doing that in the sales call. But if I was doing that sales call over the phone, I would definitely ask it then. And then the last thing is just goals. What do you want to achieve? How do we measure it?
So it sounds like you're definitely not shying away from the original onboarding form, being very, very thorough and trying to get as much done. You guys, everyone's nodding, so it sounds like that's kind of consensus.
I mean, Maddy is way more organized than I am at this point.
Only as of recently.
with what she's describing, she's way more organized in that process. But I agree with everything she said because we're both content creators, I could identify with that. I'm usually asking them, and I don't have a form. I usually just ask them on the phone, who's your audience? You know, what kind of content do you want us to create for them? You know, are we creating blogs or emails? I'll usually ask them, what is your goal with the content? Are we just trying to do this for informational purposes? Are you trying to rank in search so that you can get more customers and clients? So I do have those questions, which are usually about 3 or 4, which is, who are we speaking to? What type of content are we creating? What are your expectations? How often are we doing this? Usually those are my questions, but Maddy has it going on. She has a whole form. So I recommend her process.
I'll send you an after if you want to see.
But ultimately, I think that the goal with both of our processes is to really find out what the client wants, right? And because you want to give them what they want. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, and I feel like we have developed our process over the course of the last, I mean, it's been probably 3 years. And what we'll do, kind of soup to nuts, is when we land a client, in the first email that we send to them, we create a Google Drive account for them. So we use Google Drive a lot. So we'll create a Google Drive folder with the client's name. And then inside that Google Drive folder, we have an onboarding questionnaire and a work plan. And the work plan kind of covers the first 3 months of working with them. And the onboarding questionnaire, in the spirit, since Maddy pulled hers up, I'll read off some stuff that's on ours. I just pulled ours up. So yeah, getting access to their website, their Google Analytics, their Google Search Console, and just getting some general information about their business, you know, the URL, what's the business name, where's it located, that type of thing, because we do a lot of name, address, phone number listings. So like a lot of the questions that we ask are like, you know, what other marketing channels do you currently use, online or offline? You know, are you currently engaged with any other vendors besides us? And those are questions really to kind of pry them to say, okay, well, yeah, I'm working with these 2 other people, so that our, like, you know, metrics don't clash with each other, so we can say we're accountable for this work that we're doing. Are you currently performing any other internet marketing in-house? Who are some of the biggest perceived competitors that you're going up against? How are you different from your competitors? What's your UVP? And that stuff that we try to lace into the content. Who are your target audiences or buyer personas? Describe your sales cycle. What are your overall business goals? How do you measure objectives or KPIs? Please include micro measurements. What are your biggest hurdles in marketing? What keywords do prospects use to find your website? What are the biggest selling points of your services, geographic markets? And then we really dive into like a handful of other questions around like, how many leads or sales do you get on an average day, week, or month? What is the current cost per lead, cost per sale? What's the average size of a sale? What is the sales closing rate with online leads? What's the average lifetime value of a customer? What's your retention rate? How many customers purchase again? So we really go in depth, and then kind of the final really question for us and what we kind of gauge, you know, the start of the relationship on is we always ask them, like, what does success look like? And we say, well, what does success look like, you know, with working with a Guerrilla Agency? Like if we get, you know, and a lot of people, it's so interesting because, you know, we'll have people that fill out the form that say like if we get 1 customer, if you get us 1 customer in 6 months, that's going to be gangbusters, you know, and those are usually the clients, but the net is like, you know, 10 or 20,000 or whatever the case is. But that being said, it's just really interesting to hear what clients have to say in regards to that, because then we can go back and say, okay, well, hey, 3 months in, we acquired you that 1 customer. Like, let's have a celebratory, you know, pop a bottle of champagne and let's do a little call or come into the office and hang out, you know. But yeah, so we do go really in depth, and And that's part of our process in a way where, you know, that way we can take that onboarding questionnaire and share it with our team, the team that's going to be working on that specific client. And, you know, that way we don't have to get everybody involved in that, you know, initial discussion, and we try to get our clients to go really in depth. So that's kind of our process.
Nice.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You know, the more times you have to go back to a client and be like, oh, now I need this, or now I want to have this discussion, it's just, you know, everybody loves their clients. Clients are great, but sometimes they have other things going on, and it's hard to get a hold of them or hard to get what you need from them, and that sort of thing. So
I do have something to add on kind of that regard. So when it comes to these intake forms and like all the things that you want clients to do, I think that it's easy to be like, oh, I'm asking a lot of them, you know, like this is kind of overwhelming. And so one thing that I do to try to incentivize them to like actually fill it out is I say at the beginning of the form, you know, I know this is a lot of stuff, but I will send you a copy of this when you're done, and you can use it with any other marketing people that you work with. So it won't be a waste of time. You can use, even if you don't work with me, I'm going to send it to you. You could use it. The other thing that I recently learned, Laura Elizabeth, she started this WordPress plugin that's like a client portal that you can add to a WordPress site. And her idea, which I thought was absolutely brilliant, is buy them like a $15 gift card to like a coffee shop where they're at, because you probably got their address when you were onboarding them. And even if you didn't, you know, you could do Starbucks or whatever. But it's just kind of a nice little token to be like, hey, take this, you know, get yourself some treats, fill it out, you know, put a little warm, fuzzy feeling in them while they're, you know, doing what is work and what is basically data entry. But I just thought that was so smart, and it's also like a cool way to support a local business to your customer, and I'm sure they're gonna love that. So just another thing that I've recently wanted to start incorporating in my process.
Okay,
Yeah.
I have to expand on that just like a little bit, and it's like sitting right in front of me right now. But we do these boxes. So I got a box from Flywheel. They do web hosting, WordPress hosting. And they sent me, for being a gold partner, they like sent me this big box, and I like opened it. But then like a client gets this after kickoff, and it has like a little hat in it. It has like pens, like little Gorilla stickers. There's one of our employees bought a 3D printer, so we got these little 3D printed gorillas. So we'll like send this swag box out to them like the second they become a client, and that's been really exciting. Everyone like loves getting the little box and opening it. And it says gorilla on the front. It's just pretty cool.
I love that.
This is perfect because we're covering all ends of the spectrum here and how you can handle this with your client relationship. So we can all aspire to be AJ and to be the size of Guerrilla Agency and be able to do that. If you're starting out and you have no money at all, you can still kind of productize everything that you're asking them for, and then give it to them for free. But at least, you know, package it up into something useful. So either way, no matter your resources, you know, you can use this process to give them something that will be useful to them. So I really like that a lot. One of the things when we first kicked off this conversation, and you guys were talking about pitching and going door to door and sending all these emails, I already was at information overload of keeping track of it. And now we're talking about all the questions that you're going to be asking them, the onboarding form, the intake form. Now I'm really at information overload of keeping track of all these people. So what to you all, what does that process look like? When do you start keeping track of people? When they are just cold prospects, maybe when they're a little bit further along, and I'd love to kind of hear more about the process of keeping track of them.
Yeah, I can. Oh yeah, you got it.
Go ahead, AJ. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I would just say like our process really is that discovery call, and when somebody does the discovery call, and we get in there and we talk about things, and they have the budget, they sound excited to work with us. That's when I would start keeping track of them. So some type of like either, you know, they filled out a form and they, you know, have the budget, or they did a call with you and they have the budget, or whatever the case is, you know, budget and, you know, and the willingness to work with you guys and all that other good stuff. and want your services, that's when I would keep track of them. Like keeping track of every single call that you get or call that you do with the people that don't have budget to follow up with them would be a challenge. That's just my take.
Yeah.
Do you use Excel, or do you have a tool, or do you just reread your emails every morning?
Every single
And I'm trying to I'm trying to now gear this towards people who are just starting out. I would use Excel. And to be honest with you, I still keep track of leads in Excel and just on kind of a month-to-month basis, like especially stuff that we close. I'll just pop it into an Excel spreadsheet. I love Excel. So I would use Excel. There's a lot of other tools out there. And we used to use, I'm forgetting the name of it now. Today we use SharpSpring to kind of keep track of all of our leads. But that's probably not great for people who are just starting out because it's like an enterprise level software. But there's a few other, like just even like grabbing some type of cheaper CRM out there, like Pipedrive is what we used to use, and that was like $30 a month. But that might even be expensive. So I would say like Excel works just fine, you know?
Yeah, I would agree. I would say Excel works really well if you can remember to go back to it and save it under a name that you go back to. Because I realize I save too many Excel spreadsheets and forget which one is which. So as long as you file that correctly, that works really well. I like to use Google Sheets, which is very similar to Excel. Another tool that I've been finding really handy recently is Asana. So within Asana is a project management software, but there are ways for you to put processes in. And so, for instance, you could decide, okay, this is my list for people I'm contacting. Once you've contacted them, you move them over to the list that says contacted. And then once you hear back from them, you can move. So it's like a little board. And if you think about Trello, if you've used Trello before, it's like that. Asana has a feature like that, and there's several softwares out there like that. So if that works for you, because I realize for all of us, our brains work differently, and an Excel spreadsheet may work well, or something like Asana where you're physically moving the task from column to column may work for you. Whichever one it is, and Asana is free for a lot of its features. I think it's when you're a bigger agency, you tend to need more, so you use more. But the two tools I'd recommend, Google Sheets, which is like Excel, or Asana even.
So yeah, I think it's ultimately like what works for you. You don't want to overcomplicate it. You want to do the thing you're actually going to follow through on. So, the most fancy customer relationship manager tool in the world may not be a good fit just because it might be overwhelming to you. So keep it simple. I think before you pick any tool, you want to define your sales process. So that's, things like, before a lead is contacted, and then when you have that first call, and then when you present a solution, and then when you either close them or you don't, or maybe it's something you have to follow up on later. So like, what are those stages for you? Figure them out, and maybe you'll probably have to refine them over time. But once you figure that out, my favorite tool is HubSpot's CRM. And I would say if I had unlimited budget and like a huge company, it would be Salesforce. Just going back to my sales days, I think it's really like a great tool. It's clean. You can do so much with it, but you usually need a Salesforce admin on staff, which is like $100,000 plus salary right there. So so probably not, not something that I would consider until I become a rich millionaire. But in the meantime, HubSpot CRM is free. I think you can even like have unlimited team members. So even as you grow and you add, someone who does sales onto your team, you can have access, they can have access. It's still free. The only things you pay for are some like advanced reporting functionality. There's some other extra functionality, but I have never gotten to a point with HubSpot CRM where my needs were not covered by the free plan. The other thing that's so great about it is the Zapier integration. So just to give you a taste of something that's going on in my CRM setup, I have an integration between HubSpot and then through Zapier to this tool called Feedier. So all I have to do is like check a box in like a contact record for a given client in my HubSpot CRM, and then it sends them like a feedback thing like a month after that, or something like that. where they can tell me what it's like working with me, you know, give me some scores and stuff like that. So you can just do really cool things with it is what I'm trying to say without paying for it. And, but at the end of the day, if HubSpot, if there's just like too much bells and whistles and things to look at, use a Google Sheet. Just use something so that you're not, you know, trying to keep it all in your head. And the last thing I'll say is the snooze feature on Gmail is like almost as good as a CRM.
I love that. I love not shying away from looking into these tools either, because so many of them have a freemium model that I never would have thought of before looking into it. That people, you know, just because it's freemium, it's still really useful, especially if it's just you or if it's just a really small group taking care of this, then there's a lot there that you can use. In our last couple minutes here, I'm going to rattle off a couple questions. So if you have any of them, throw them in the question box on the sidebar here. So I'll kick off with the first one, which is if you do want things like a website, a logo, do you have any creative ideas or resources of how you can get those things with very little money?
Fiverr.
Yeah, or Upwork.
Yeah.
Big Fiverr fan? Okay, awesome.
The other, I guess I do have one other thing to say on that. Like when I first started, we did a trade of services with a designer, and that's who came up with the entire Guerrilla brand. So that was, literally it was free services, free marketing work for kind of an exchange for the logo design and whatnot. So it actually ended up being cheaper than like Fiverr or something like that. But you got to find somebody who's pretty good.
Awesome. Okay, next, when we were talking about things you include in your prospecting email, Maddy mentioned saying, oh, I looked at this and you look like you could benefit from this or that. How much time and work would you guys recommend spending on creating something like that? And I'll kind of add myself because I'm interested in the answer to this, that, you know, where's the line between free labor and just doing a good intake? And does that line shift as you grow your business?
So I'd say make email templates. I use a tool called Text Expander, so I could just like type something and it'll expand in Gmail, and then use like 30 seconds to personalize it. That's my best tip.
When it comes to the research phase of things, where you kind of maybe check out that client before you cold email them, personally, you can spend however much time you want, but personally, I would say don't spend more than an hour or even 30, because there's a lot that you can find out about people immediately. And so, you know, use that, like, you can find out so much in half an hour, to be honest. And use that to do your research and go ahead and cold pitch. You don't want to like overthink it, you know. So I'd say like 30 minutes to an hour at most to do that research. So like you said, it doesn't become free labor of doing like a 5-hour research project. That's not necessary.
Yeah. I want to really quickly get in this last question. For social media and SEO, do you require a minimum length of the partnership?
I don't, but I give a discount for paying ahead of time.
I don't either, but my clients I tend to take on long-term clients, because then you have some predictability in your income. So I've had one-off clients, but most of the time my clients have been with me for years. So I tend to gravitate towards those people that have an ongoing need for my services.
Yeah, and I always try to set expectations up front by saying like, hey, it's going to take 3 months, 6 months, you know, for this to really, the fruits of our labor to really show up. So I set expectations that way. But in regards to our contracts, we always go month to month with that. And I always say, like, if you're not seeing value in the work that we're providing, then I don't want to work with you because you don't want to work with us and you're not seeing value. And I want you to prosper in your business and I want you to find value somewhere else. So I always say month to month.
Yeah, I would have to imagine if you have someone that's willing to pay to outsource their marketing and they don't already know that good marketing takes a little bit to really show that return, then they might be a dicey client for you to get into business for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not a good fit. I know that we're getting over time. Are you guys available for one or two more quick questions?
Sure.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. How do you go about getting content from clients when working with remote clients? You can't take the job of going to their business and gathering content or creating it. So how do you hold them accountable for providing you with the content? And I guess maybe this question is asking about if you use a way of sharing them or sending them that you think is more efficient than any other way.
Could you come again with that question, like sharing the content with folks or sharing your work with folks? I don't think I understood the question. Sorry.
Yeah.
I think information gathering is kind of what it sounds like.
Information gathering from the from the client.
Client, yeah, like to get the intake stuff, kind of.
Oh, gotcha. Well, I always let them know I can't start without that. So. You know, if you want your work to be done, you need to send this. And usually that solves the problem, right? Because I can't start doing anything if I don't have things from you, if I don't have what I need. So if you've paid me, you better be sending me that stuff because then your work is not getting done, you know? I don't want to say it in a threatening way, but sometimes you kind of have to put your foot down a little bit just to,
Yeah, I would say if you figure it out to let me know because that has been an issue for us too. So
it can be. Thankfully, I've had good clients and that never is a problem.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, send it to me or else this work is not getting done, you know. And
yeah.
So I would say that you could give them options. So like some people, like just to give an example, for some articles I write, I have to talk to like a subject matter expert on their team. So I'll say, I can email you the questions. We can get on a Zoom call and I'll ask you the questions. You can record yourself answering them. Like, what do you want to do? But so that's one way. And then another tool that you could use, I think it's more geared towards getting content for like websites. Is Content Snare, and I think it's set up so that it sends reminders and stuff, so like you don't have to be the reminder person.
Awesome. Okay, what is your magic phrase for when a client is not a good fit? They want to work with you, but you're like, Is there a way that you diplomatically deliver that news?
Yeah, just give them a higher fee, basically.
right. We, I don't know. We call that an asshole tax, which I think is kind of funny a little bit. But yeah, it's either that or like what we'll do. And we haven't had to. Luckily, we haven't had to fire a lot of clients. But normally we'll just talk through, like, hey, we'll get on a phone call. We'll say this, the behavior they're really showing us. You're sending us 300 emails a week or whatever the case is, and you're not letting us do our process, and this just isn't the way that we work. I don't think this is really a great fit on our end, and I'd be happy to refer you over to another agency that could probably facilitate your needs specifically. So it's always a tough conversation, but yeah, if there's a client out there that's really not a great fit, then yeah, that's my like magic phrase. This isn't a good fit.
That's great. I'm gonna put out a request to my colleague Garrett, who's live tweeting this. We use #AssholeText.
One thing I wanted to add that you just made me think of. So I have a friend, Erin Flynn, who she did web design and now she kind of teaches people how to freelance and other things related to that. So she has a contract. This is more about setting boundaries, but it says in her contract that the relationship is null and void if they message her on Facebook. So set your boundary. Put it in the contract. If you don't want them to text you, I know I don't want clients to text me. That's what my email's for. Just set your boundaries.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you require upfront payment? If not, what's your payment schedule?
Yeah, so my payment schedule is monthly. Well, usually I'll do work in a month and then I'll invoice clients. And it's like I mentioned earlier, most of my clients have a need for ongoing content. So we know every month these are the number of deliverables, right? So these are the number of blog posts I'm writing. Once the end, usually I try to do it the last business day of the month. I'll send them the invoice for all the content I created. They can double check that with what they have. I kind of also do the per word pricing with my services, and that could be different for you if you're a social media manager or whatever, but whatever your pricing is, you've agreed on it. And so at the end of the month, I send the invoice and I wait for payment. Now, I will add in here really quickly that there will be clients who will not pay the invoice on time. So you
Really?
oh yes.
Oh, that happens to you?
Oh. so sometimes I'll wait like a week and then I'd be like, oh, maybe they didn't get that. And then I send a reminder. And then if still after that they don't send one, I'll send them an email. And then by 4 weeks, I'm like, I'm not doing any work for you if we don't get this payment by this point, right? And I really do cease doing any work for them until I see a payment. And it's just, I've had that with 1 or 2 clients, not so many. Usually it's just the 1 out of maybe 10 of them that does that. But even then, you still have to be firm. But to the original, I wanted to add that because for newer freelancers, sometimes that's difficult to navigate. But I send it out on a monthly basis.
Awesome. I'm going to, sorry, go ahead, Maddy.
So I'll just say quickly, so I do retainers ahead of the month for most clients. I'm a little bit more lax for long-term clients because I know they're good for it. But when I do retainer pricing, I offer a discount. If you pay ahead, you get a discount. And if you want an article one at a time, well, you still have to pay ahead, but you're not going to get a discount. So basically, the incentive is to work with me long-term. Paying up front eliminates all those non-payment issues down the road where you've done the work and then you want to collect on it. So that's just something to think about. Yeah, I think that's the main stuff.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, I mean, with both G and Maddy, we do retainer pricing for all of our marketing services. It's just like the golden circle. If you can charge monthly and get into kind of that monthly billing cycle, and you can kind of build that up, that's how you can scale quickly by offering retainer pricing. So that's what we do. I mean, we do a lot of project stuff for like websites or whatnot, but you can get creative with that too. Like if you do a website and it takes you a lot of, work on the front end, you can kind of keep their hosting, or maybe you host it internally or whatever the case is. And just charge them monthly for months afterwards or a year afterwards or whatever the case is. But yeah, you can get creative with stuff like that, but I like to get on as much retainer pricing as possible.
And one last thing I'll add is if somebody doesn't pay you, it's going to make you look bad if you publicly shame them. So resist the temptation. You can shame them in private, in a one-to-one conversation. And that usually, if you are a compelling person, you can make them pay up. They'll do it until you make it public, and then they probably won't. So
yeah, no, totally.
So I'm going to cut off the Q&A there because we're over. There's one last question about too much work is building up, the first step towards expanding. That's a little bit of a Pandora's box, but Maddy actually has written an incredible piece of content on that is on our website, the Fan Booster website. So I'm trying to find the link to that, and I'll throw that in the Q&A because I think we could talk till we're blue in the face about that process. So right. I'll cut us off there. I want to thank our panelists so much for staying a few minutes late to talk about all of this, and also just for all these great insights. For everyone who wants to dig into this more or reflect back on any of the insights, look for the replay video in your emails tomorrow. Next week, there will be another email. You can also find it on the blog. It'll be a recap. And there, we'll have it really cleanly written out list of all these things that you need to have before you send out those prospect emails. The prioritized things they said you need in those emails, what you need on intake form. We'll have it all listed out, ready to go, so that you guys can all look at that as well. But thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you everyone who attended as well. It was great having all you guys, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks for having me.